Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, we're going to be breaking down the 2024 Arnold Palmer Invitational. This is one of the PGA Tour's signature events this calendar year, so we've got an absolutely stacked field at a course that is going to provide a super tough test for these guys. And if you've played any PGA Tour or golf video game in the last 8 years, this is a course that's been on it, so this is a course that we know pretty well. And so this should be, with an iconic field and an iconic venue, this should be a really fun event, and I'm really looking forward to it here this week. So what we're going to do here for you, this is going to be a comprehensive breakdown. We're going to break down the course itself and what types of golf succeed here and what are some key stats and trends that you need to know before you pick anybody this week. And then no matter what your game is, whether you're playing DFS, whether you are betting, whether you're playing one and done, we're going to take a look at the board and tell you some guys that we like and don't like this week, as well as, dive into a little bit of the weeds on some strategy for all those game formats. So no matter what you're playing this week, we've got you covered here for this preview. Now, make sure while you are here, please like the video. It really does help me out a ton. And if you're listening on audio, please rate and review. I promise those do not fall on deaf ears. They help the videos and help the podcast get noticed, and I really do appreciate when you guys do that. You guys are the absolute best. Now, in terms of a schedule, I kind of want to do some Puerto Rico Open content because the PGA Tour does have an alternate event this week. I'm not sure if my schedule is going to permit for that, though. So if you want some Puerto Rico Open content, let me know. Reach out to me on Twitter or let me know in the comments on YouTube or on the audio. But if you want to hear more about the Puerto Rico Open, let me know, because I am strongly considering it. And if there's a demand for it, then I'm going to give some supply to meet that demand. Also, make sure you're following me on Twitter. If there is a Puerto Rico Open episode or if there are additional episodes for these alternate events on the PGA Tour, I will be sure to tweet them out and get them out there. So if you're following me on Twitter and you're subscribed to the channel and to the audio feed, you will not miss an episode if we do, decide to put out a surprise episode. But, with it being March right now, we are a two-sport podcast covering college basketball as well as golf. So if you are subscribed to the channel, if you're normally here for all the golf stuff, and you're going to be playing in bracket pools, you're going to be watching March Madness in a few weeks, go ahead and pop on over to the college basketball DFS videos, play some college basketball DFS, get used to hearing some of these names and some of these teams that you're going to be, picking to win a bracket in a few weeks. So strongly advise checking out both sports content here at Mike's Money Picks. All right, so that does it for the intro here, y'all. So let's go ahead and dive into the course itself, Bay Hill. All right, so before we do anything else, let's go ahead and talk about the course itself, which is Bay Hill in Orlando, Florida. It is a pure Arnold Palmer design, which is, kind of makes sense considering that we are playing the Arnold Palmer Invitational this week. Now, this is one of the toughest tests that you will see on the PGA Tour year in and year out. It is a par 72. It is a little over 7,400 yards. So the fact that it's par 72, there are 4 par 5s on this course, but really, those are the only easy holes, if we're being totally honest. Also, what's important to know this year is that this is a signature event, meaning the field is going to be only 69 players, and there will be a cut on Friday with the top 50 in ties advancing to the weekend. Just like what we saw a few weeks ago at the Genesis Invitational is exactly what we're going to see here at the Arnold Palmer Invitational. So just something to note if you're doing anything this week. It is a field of 69 and there will be a cut. So on the scorecard, there are 4 par 5s, which do play pretty easy. There are 4 par 3s, though, which are very long and very difficult. 3 of the 4 par 3s are over 200 yards. And so those are not birdie holes. Those are holes where you're just trying to survive and make par. And really, you're just trying to make it to those par 5s because those are the really only birdie opportunities you get. 2 of them are quite short. You may be familiar with number 6, which is the one a few years back where Bryson DeChambeau tried to drive the green. The hole is curved around the lake in a way that you can take an angle directly at the green over the lake, and Bryson DeChambeau almost did it. But generally speaking, that is a eagle or birdie hole for most PGA Tour players. And if you've ever played the Tiger Woods, or I guess not Tiger Woods anymore, but the EA Sports PGA Tour game, that is something you can try out to do on there if you have the wind in the right direction, is try to drive that green. So those are the par 5s and par 3s, but the par 4s are no slouch either, which is why the par 5s are really the only scoring holes. 5 of the par 4s on this course measure 450 yards or more. So with it being a par 72, you really have to score on those 4 par 5s because the birdies are not going to be very plentiful elsewhere on the course. Now, the fairways themselves here at Bay Hill are not that wide. They're not that narrow either. They rank kind of in the middle of the road, but you absolutely cannot miss the fairway at this course. There is water lurking at everywhere. There are bunkers lurking everywhere. And oh, by the way, the rough is some of the longest rough that you will see in a non-major championship event this calendar year. So if you can't miss the fairway for water, bunkers, or rough, like there's just nowhere else to put it other than in the fairway off the tee. And so you are going to want to be in the fairway. But with the sheer distance that this course, challenges guys with, you're not only going to want to be in the fairway, but you're going to want to be long and in the fairway. So this is a big week where total driving, being long and in the fairway is going to be super important. Guys who play well at this course tend to be great drivers of the golf ball. On average, the rough is about a half stroke penalty if you find it. So generally speaking, being a little bit back but in the fairway is going to be a little bit better than, in the rough further down. But, there are certain guys that would prefer that because you do get shorter clubs in. But this is a week where you're going to want to be both long and accurate off the tee. This course has played top 7 in difficulty on the PGA Tour in each of the last 5 years, which was when I believe they got a new superintendent, in the last 5 years. And so that has, played a factor into them wanting to make this course very difficult and very demanding for all PGA Tour pros. Now, the greens here are quite large, but they are your typical Florida Bermuda grass greens, and they are lightning fast. I mentioned this a little bit last week, talking about the Cognizant Classic, but Bermuda grass, if you've ever played golf on Bermuda, which me growing up in North Carolina, I have, it's something that you kind of get the knack for the more you do it. Like if I were to play one round on a Bermuda course that's got very fast greens, I would probably struggle putting the first time. But if I play multiple back-to-back rounds on Bermuda, that's when I get a little bit better at it personally. And so I think that guys who played last week at the Cognizant, there's definitely something to be said for them getting used to this Florida Bermuda grass as opposed to coming straight over from California POA or the tropical paspalum that we saw at the Mexico Open. Now, also chipping here is quite different than you see at a lot of venues. Many of the short game areas here at this course are rough, not, these little, shaved short grass chipping areas. So basically, if you're familiar with playing courses like this, the ball can kind of sit up in the rough and it can give you these little fluffy little lies, which makes it real easy to, get the contact you want on the ball. It doesn't require as much precision as chipping off of a short grass area. And so some guys do have a knack for chipping off of this type of surface. And it's definitely, there's other events that you see this at. A lot of the major championships are this way. The Memorial Tournament in Muirfield Village is this way. There's guys that have a knack for just chipping off of rough as opposed to short grass, and that is something that I do think is worth looking into this week. Now, also, I do think that if you look at the players who do well here, it really kind of goes in line with what I was saying about this course's characteristics, right? So if you look at the course history here at Bay Hill, the course history is some of the stickiest on the PGA Tour. It ranks 4th in terms of stickiest course history. So guys who play well here usually continue to play well here. And it's no surprise that the guy who ranks number 1 in overall course history is Kurt Kitayama, because he did win this event as a debutant last year. But after that, the next guys that are best at this course are Jordan Spieth, Scotty Scheffler, Patrick Cant Lay, Rory McIlroy, Cam Young, Sungjae Im, Max Homa, Emiliano Grillo, and Matt Fitzpatrick. And I mean, that's pretty much a list of some of the best and the best that the world of golf has to offer. And so great players tend to play well here because, there's what this course provides is an opportunity for them to show the skill set that makes them the best players in the world. It's very demanding off the tee. It requires a lot of long approach shots with irons. It's very difficult if you find yourself in the rough or in the bunker or in water. And so, the skill sets that make these guys the best players in the world are the skill sets that are going to allow them to be some of the best players here at this event. Now, if you look at last year, what you can see is that a lot of the guys who finished at the top did not do all their damage with the putter. They did most of their damage, tee to green, which if you look at the names is no surprise, right? You had Kurt Kitayama and Harris English gaining 6 strokes putting or more for this event. But other than that, everybody else in the top 5 was either a neutral or, slightly below average putter, with Scotty Scheffler finishing tied 4th with a, negative strokes putting, Patrick Cant Lay finishing tied for 4th with negative strokes gained putting. The other pathway to success here is if the course is going to be so difficult, you can short game your way into a win here. And that is almost what Jordan Spieth did last year. He gained almost 6 strokes around the green for the event, which, a lot of chipping, really did him well. I believe he chipped in a few times, and that's just kind of what Jordan Spieth does. So If you're looking for the pathway to success here at this course, you want to either be an elite tee to green player or you want to be a guy who can just get supremely hot with chipping and putting. And I would prefer the first option of the two, elite tee to green play. Now, for the key stats here at this course, I think it's a little bit of a different profile than what we've seen in recent weeks. I do want to prioritize strokes gained off the tee as well as total driving. Total driving takes into account distance and accuracy, and there's a formula involved. But basically, the better of a driver you are of the golf ball, the better you're going to put yourself in a situation to succeed here this week. Now, in terms of approach play is super important this week because it can come from a variety of distances, it can come from a variety of surfaces, and there's not a whole lot of margin for error because some of these greens are perched right up next to water. So I do want to prioritize strokes gained approach, and in terms of proximities, every proximity bucket that is 150 yards and above, I think matters because you're not really getting a whole lot of wedges on this course. All the par threes are long, all the par fives, if you're going for it in two, which most guys will be, are going to be 175 plus approaches. So definitely you want to prioritize long proximities. With it being a difficult course, I do want to prioritize bogey avoidance as well. And then I also want to prioritize when it comes to putting on Bermuda grass. Like I said, there's a knack to it. There is a little bit of a trickiness to it. And so I want guys who are good at putting on that Bermuda grass. And I am going to prioritize course history because it is one of the stickiest courses on the PGA Tour. Now, I don't think the comp courses are something you can really go by a whole lot this week. I would rather prioritize comp or actual course history at this event as opposed to comp course history at other events. So the other comp courses I think you can find, though, are PGA National, Quail Hollow, and then all major championship venues. Guys that play well here tend to play well at those courses also. All right, so let's take a quick little breather, and then we're going to dive into the rabbit hole and talk about some stats and some, kind of some interesting stuff that we can look at for guys who might play well here. Now, if you thought I was being facetious when I said dive down a rabbit hole, I really was not because The Rabbit Hole is the name of a site developed by BetSpertsGolf.com, and this is a site that I've subscribed to recently, and I cannot recommend it enough. It is a huge database that allows you to do all kinds of filters and conditions, and basically you can narrow down any stat you want here in the rabbit hole, and you can use it to create a custom model, which I think can allow you to try some different angles and find an edge on a lot of the competition where a lot of data sites do not go into this level of detail. And I've been a big fan of this ever since I've gotten to using it, and I cannot recommend enough. BetSpertsGolf.com are the great people behind this. So let's go ahead and take a look at a few stats in the rabbit hole and a few guys who pop up as the best at it. So one thing I wanted to look at was who are the best players in the state of Florida over the last few years. And so in terms of strokes gained total in the state of Florida, the top five are Victor Hovland, Keegan Bradley, Justin Thomas, Shane Lowry, and Scotty Scheffler, which is not really a surprising list considering that some of those guys have wins or great track record in the state of Florida in their career. Now, another stat that I wanted to look at that was a little bit interesting was club head speed. So if you remember me earlier mentioning Bryson DeChambeau trying to drive the green here on a par 5, well, Bryson DeChambeau actually won this event in 2021, and a big reason why is because club head speed is a big deciding factor in being able to strike balls effectively out of the rough and being able to generate spin out of the rough. Because what ends up happening here on this course is when you find yourself in the rough and you have a long iron because it's a long hole, it becomes really hard to get that club up in the air and get it to stop on a green. If you have a ton of club head speed, you're able to really get under the ball and compress it and get it to go with a higher arc and get it to land on the green and stop, which is why Bryson had so much success here, is because he is the king of club head speed. So the top guys in this field in club head speed are Minwoo Lee, Jake Knapp, Rory McIlroy, Wyndham Clark, and Xander Schauffele. Apex height is another stat that's kind of similar to that, where it just measures the height of your shots. So guys who hit higher shots tend to be better long iron players. And so the guys who are the top 5 in apex height in this field are Sammy Valimaki, Jason Day, Ben An, Minwoo Lee, and Keegan Bradley. Real interesting to see Minwoo Lee pop up in the top 5 in both categories. He's an absolute flusher of the golf ball, and I think that he is a very interesting guy to talk about this week. Now, next up, let's talk about how guys are off the tee when you have a high penalty for missing the fairway and a high penalty for finding the rough. So The best guys in the field in strokes gained off the tee in those conditions are Rory McIlroy, Scotty Scheffler, Ludwig Aubert, Cameron Young, and Ben An. Those are pretty much your elite level drivers of the golf ball in this field, or is those top five. And so if you're curious, Minwoo Lee, the guy that we just mentioned, comes in at number 8. So definitely interesting there. But those are the guys that are going to be the best off the tee here in this event because they're generally the best off the tee in events where there's a high penalty for missing the fairway. Now, next up, let's talk about total driving. So just total driving for the last 6 months. The guys who have been the best in the field have been Cameron Young, Ludwig Aubert, David Ford, Adam Hadwin, and Corey Connors. Not really any surprises there. Those are guys I tend to think of in terms of elite drivers of the golf ball, except for David Ford. I think this is like a one-time event for him. I don't know much about him, but I do know he is in the field, and I believe he has some kind of sponsor's exemption or qualification that he got in. He's not a guy you need to be considering. After that, let's talk about how guys can perform with long approaches out of the rough. So the guys who are the best in like mid-range approaches out of the rough are Sahith Theegala, Scotty Scheffler, Brendan Todd, Victor Hovland, and Siwoo Kim. And then long approaches out of the rough are Brendan Todd, Colin Morikawa, Patrick Cant Lay, Lucas Glover, and Ben An. Ben An keeps popping up on a lot of these stats, so he's probably a guy I'm going to be playing a lot in DFS this week. Now, worth noting also, too, I did set the filter on that one for long rough length only, which this course will very much be. Now, after that, let's also look at overall strokes gained approach on courses with thick rough. So in other words, whether you're playing from the fairway or the rough, how are you doing or you're on your second shot on courses where the rough is thick? And so this also plays into consideration golfers' decisions off the tee. Did you lay back off the tee because of that thick rough? And do you have a longer approach shot? So I think that this kind of, brings in a lot of stuff into play. And I think it's a very good stat for this event. In terms of strokes gained approach in events with long rough, the top 5 is Scotty Scheffler, Hideki Matsuyama, Rory McIlroy, Russell Henley, and Victor Hovland. In case you're wondering, Scotty Scheffler is going to show up in the top 5 to 10 of pretty much every stat except for putting because that's just what he does. Now, let's also talk about scrambling from the rough. As I mentioned earlier, this is an event where a lot of the short game shots are going to come from the rough as opposed to short grass or bunkers. And so the guys who are the best at scrambling from the rough in average to thick rough are Scotty Scheffler, Max Homa, Brendan Todd, Matt Fitzpatrick, and Chris Kirk are your top 5 in that category. Last, let's finish it off with who are the guys who are best at putting on fast Bermuda greens, and that is Mackenzie Hughes, Keegan Bradley, Xander Schauffele, Harris English, and Justin Rose rounding out your top 5 there. Now, if you throw all of that into a custom model, the top 10 of my custom model, and this is really no surprise when you hear the names who come out at the top. Rory McIlroy and Scotty Scheffler are 1, 2 in my model, which tells me I made a pretty good model if those two guys are coming out in the top 2. The third option is really interesting. It's Ludwig Aubert, who is an absolute elite off-the-tee player, elite driver of the golf ball, good on long approaches, good at courses with thick rough, and it is his second time playing this event, of which he made the cut here last year as an amateur, and so I think I am very intrigued by Ludwig Aubert at this event. Anyway, the rest of my top 10, Patrick Cant Lay 4, Victor Hovland 5, Xander Schauffele 6, Chris Kirk 7, Matt Fitzpatrick 8, Jordan Spieth 9, and Max Homa 10. Now, this really does track with what we talked about earlier, where this is a course where guys who are the best in the world have a chance to exemplify that they're the best in the world. And so very generally speaking, that was a pretty chalky model because the guys who are the best should show up in the best if you're making a good model for this course. Now, if you're playing DFS and you're looking for a value play that showed up in my model, you do have Chris Kirk at $7,800 on DraftKings at number 7, Corey Connors at the same price at number 12, Steven Yeager at $7,200 at 13, and then Shane Lowry at $7,500 at 15. Ben An was at 19. I kind of thought he would be higher after he popped up on all those stats. Adam Schenk, sitting at $6,200, is at number 22 in my model, so he might be the 6K guy that I should be playing based off of that model alone. All right, so now that we have all of the knowledge about this course and all of the stats that should play well at this course, let's take a look at the board and see how we should, who we should be picking at this course, shall you say. All right, so as we take a look at the board on DraftKings, if you were playing DFS this week, DraftKings is pretty much back to being their usual salary structure. For a few weeks, we had the guys starting up in the 12K range and then going all the way down to the 5K range. They're going a little more conventional this week with 6K as the minimum salary and Scotty Scheffler as the highest price golfer in the 11K range. Now, if you are, wanting to play DFS or one and done or outright betting this week, this is an event where the top of the board is going to be better than most weeks because, as we've talked about, this is a course where the skill set possessed by the best golfers in the world is going to be accentuated this week, and they're going to be able to use those skills as a big-time advantage. I also think that Scottie Scheffler and Rory McIlroy are head and shoulders above everybody else in the field. I will be playing them very heavily in DFS. I will be strongly considering them in one and done. More on that later. And I'm not an outright better because it's not legal in my state, but I generally don't think that betting on favorites is very profitable long-term in golf. This might be a week where you just might want to bite the bullet and bet on one of these two guys. So if you look at what Scottie has been doing, so Scottie has been elite in pretty much every single category except the putter. He was, I believe, the number one tee to green player at the Genesis Invitational, but just the fact that he lost almost 4 strokes putting on the week did not allow him to win, and he had to settle for a T10. And that represents his floor pretty much. And if you look at his history at this event, he's came in 15th, a win, and T4. And as we talked about earlier, that T4 was when he lost strokes putting. So I think this is a course that sets up extremely well for Scottie Scheffler. His wins have been on fast Bermuda grass putting. So maybe if he can just be not awful this week with the putter, you'll probably find him in the winner's circle again. Rory McIlroy also is another guy that when you look at the model, I don't really have to make an argument for. And when you look at what he did at the Cognizant Classic, he was the number one player in the field from tee to green, but he lost almost 4 strokes putting on the greens, had to settle for a T21. And that's the number one player tee to green, even with finding the water a few times during the week. So I think he's not in as bad of a spot as you would think by looking at the finishes. I think his tee to green play last week is encouraging. And oh, by the way, he is the king of this event, no pun intended, with it being the Arnold Palmer Invitational. He has played it pretty much every year since 2015, and he has came in 13th place or better in the last 7 editions of this tournament with a win and 3 other top 5s and a top 6 finish. He is the king of Bay Hill, and I expect Rory McIlroy to be another very solid play this week. If you're playing these two guys in DFS, you do not need them to win the event to come through for you in DFS. You just need them to come in like 6th place or better, which, judging by their tee to green numbers, judging by their course history, I absolutely think these two guys are capable of that, and I think they make for great DFS and one and done plays this week. Now, after them, can we go ahead and have a Cant Lay and Schauffele discussion? So if you're a golf stats guy, you probably love Cant Lay and Schauffele because statistically, they rank out as very good players, very consistent, whose games transfers to a lot of different courses and will likely never be a bad course fit for any course on the PGA Tour. However, they don't win golf tournaments. And so I generally don't play them a lot in DFS. Like I said, I'm not an outright bettor because my state doesn't have it, but I would not be betting these guys outright to win a golf tournament just because they don't have a strong history of winning golf tournaments. And so that is kind of my thoughts on them. I would way rather pay up for Scottie Scheffler or Rory McIlroy in DFS, or I would rather play Viktor Hovland at a similar price. Viktor Hovland, when you look at what he has done recently, has not been good around the green at all. It's been his worst category, but it's been at courses that are a different style of around the green than this one. As we mentioned, this is a course where there is thick rough, and around the green is going to be coming from rough. And you look at the last few times he's played events like that, and you have the Tour Championship at East Lake, which he won. You have the BMW Championship at Olympia Fields, which he won. You have the Memorial Tournament at Muirfield Village, which he won. He is very comfortable with his short game in this type of course. So the fact that his short game has been bad does not really concern me because it's a different type of short game that he's going to be utilizing this week. And when you look at his history of this event, he kind of started off quiet with 3 top 50 finishes that were no better than 40. But in the last 2 years, he's been T2 and T10, and that T10 doesn't tell the full story. He was in the final pairing on Sunday last year. So kind of faded on Sunday a little bit, but 2 top 10s in the last 2 years. I'm not concerned about the recent short game struggles. I love the course fit for Viktor Hovland. I would way rather play Viktor Hovland than Patrick Cant Lay or Xander Schauffele at this course. Next up, we do have to go ahead and talk about the elephant in the room, Ludwig Aubert. So Ludwig did play at this event last year, and he did come in 24th place, and that was as an amateur, and where nobody really knew much about him. He was kind of like a small-owned DFS darling that week at a very low price, and I think that he's only continued to get a lot better since then. And I think that he will continue to get better because he's got the goods, dude. Like, he is an elite off the tee player. He's an elite long iron player and an elite wedge player. And so I just think that he's got the full package, and he's a guy who's going to put it together and win a big time event on the PGA Tour sooner rather than later. If you look at what he's been doing lately, in the fall, he won the RSM Classic. That is another course with Bermuda greens where water is lurking everywhere. And he was absolutely elite with the putter, gaining over 8 strokes putting for the week. In his last 3 events, T9 at the Farmers, 2nd at Pebble Beach, which he arguably could have won if a 4th round was played, and then T19 at the Genesis, where he uncharacteristically lost a little bit off the tee. So I really think that this is a good spot for Ludwig. His game is in a really good spot, and I think this is a great course fit for him with what he does. Now, the guy who is uncharacteristically good at this course is Jordan Spieth, because typically this is not what you would think of as a Jordan Spieth course. You would think of Jordan Spieth as just having this elite short game, not super long off the tee, and, kind of plays the shorter course as well, right? Colonial and Harbor Town. And he has a really good history at this event. He's came in 4th each of the last 2 times he's played it in 2021 and 2023, gaining strokes in every category both of those times, notably with big gains around the green and putting. And so if he's able to do that again, he's probably going to be in pretty good shape. The DQ at the Genesis doesn't tell the full story either. I believe he was about in 20th place when he got DQ'd. So the fact that he got DQ'd there, I think people would be feeling a lot differently about him if he was coming in off of like back-to-back top 10 finishes as opposed to a T6 and a DQ. But his game is in a good spot. He has good history here. Definitely do not mind playing Jordan Spieth this week. Sam Burns is another guy that I don't mind. He's often called Bermuda Burns because he is the best putter on Bermuda out of all surfaces. This event is a little bit of a mixed bag in terms of history. In the last 3 years, he's came in 9th and missed 2 cuts. The missed cut he had last year, he lost 4 strokes on approach, so I would assume he had some water balls. 4 strokes per round on approach, so 8 strokes total. And I really think that there had to be some water balls there for that number to be that low. But if you look at what he's done recently, he's rattled off 4 straight top 10 finishes. He's been elite with the putter lately, and he's been elite off the tee lately. Those are 2 things that will serve you well here at Bay Hill, and the approach play has been better than his baseline as well. So I really do like Sam Burns coming in this week. He's a little expensive for my taste on DraftKings, but I think he's a very sensible play. Max Homa is the next guy in the 9K range on DraftKings that I want to talk about. So he is another guy that has great history at this event. And when you look at the other courses Max Homa plays well at, it makes sense. Torrey Pines and Riviera and Quail Hollow, like those are all long golf courses. They're going to have long approaches and penal rough. And, he's been great at those courses as well. And he's been great at this course. 4 starts and 4 finishes, no worse than 24th place. He did lose big with the putter in each of the last 2 years, but the approach play and off the tee play were absolutely on point. And so if he can put it all together here this week, I definitely think Max Homa has a chance to be holding that trophy on Sunday night. And I think if I were to be betting on somebody to win this tournament, I think he is a very sneaky bet that not a whole lot of people are talking about. Will Zalatoris is the last guy that I'm going to mention in this segment before we dive into the value plays. So do not underestimate this fact. So Will Zalatoris, as well as Cameron Young, they both went to Wake Forest. And you may or may not know this, but Arnold Palmer also went to Wake Forest. It matters a lot to them to play well at and win this event for their alma mater, right? Because, you think about Wake Forest, and me being a local in North Carolina, I know this, but Wake Forest kind of has like a 3-person Mount Rushmore. It is Chris Paul, it is Tim Duncan, and it is Arnold Palmer. And these 2 guys want to make their name as the 4th on that Mount Rushmore. And so I think there is a little bit of a mental factor into Will Zalatoris wanting to win this event. He's made the cut in all 3 years here with, varying performances of 10th, 38th, and 53rd, but he's been terrible with the putter. But ever since he's got this broomstick putter, he's been pretty good. He's gained strokes putting in each of his last 3 events. He's always an elite long iron player, always an elite off the tee player. Definitely a lot to like with Will Zalatoris this week. And I would be saying that he's probably my favorite play in the upper 8K range here this week on DraftKings. Kyle Morikawa and Justin Thomas, I'm not exactly sold on. Kyle Morikawa is a guy that he needs to be in the fairway, and his lack of length is not going to help him this week at all. And I don't think it's a great course fit for him. I'm probably going to pass on Morikawa this week. JT really messed me up with the missed cut at Riviera. And I don't know. He's another guy that I don't think is a great course fit this week. So I'll probably be fading those two guys in favor of paying up for Spieth, Burns, or Homa, or paying down for Will Zalatoris. All right, so let's take a quick break and then let's talk about the value plays here this event. All right, so now heading down the board, looking at some value plays. Like, this is not like the last few weeks where the value plays are guys who are like just guys you've never heard of or guys who are going to be lucky to make the cut. Like, this is a genuine cream of the crop field this week. And so a lot of these guys that I'm describing as value plays are guys that are going to be at the top of the board more often than not. Matt Fitzpatrick has a great history here, and he had a really poor start to 2023, but he really kind of ride the ship at the Cognizant Classic, and I'm hoping that he can kind of continue that wave onto this event. Tom Kim did not fare as well at the Cognizant Classic, but it was really just because he ejected on Sunday. He was playing great before that, was uncharacteristically bad on approach on Sunday, and he was a guy who found a lot of fairways at the Cognizant Classic, and finding fairways will do you well here at this event, and I do think Tom Kim, the more time goes on, the more we're going to like him in difficult conditions. Now, Chris Kirk is a guy that I do have to mention because he did show up really well on my model, and it kind of makes sense, right? Like, his only real weakness lately has been with the putter. He's been generally a pretty good off the tee, around the green and approach player, with a blemish here and there. But when you look at his history here, it's been great. The last 5 years, he has not missed a cut, and he's came in 13th, 15th, 8th, 5th, and 39th. He has gained strokes almost in every category every single time, never losing in more than one category, never losing more than one stroke per round in a category in any of those 5 years. So with the history here, and we know that he's won in Florida because he's won the Honda Classic before, I definitely think this is a pretty good spot for Chris Kirk, and I'm hoping that kind of the quiet last few weeks will keep a few people off of him in DFS. Corey Connors is another guy who showed up pretty well for me in my model. And when you look at his stats, like, it's what we tend to think of when we think of Corey Connors, right? Like, very accurate driver of the golf ball who is not terribly long, but is always going to find the fairway. Generally pretty good iron player who just can't chip and putt to save his life. And that's what has been happening with him. But yet he's still been making cuts and posting good finishes, even in good events like a T24 at the Genesis, where he was terrible on and around the greens. But you look at his history of this event, he's been pretty solid, even with a mixed bag chipping and putting. He's came in 3rd, 11th, and 21st in the last 3 years, just an elite ball striker every time. And if he can continue that elite ball striking, I think he's a guy that you got to target in DFS this week. And I really do like Corey Connors this week. Now, after him, I do got to talk about Jake Knapp and Ben An, just because they're just absolute flushers of the golf ball. And when we talked about the whole club head speed and apex height earlier, they're two guys who rated out really well in that. And I think that just from a pure ability to hit a golf ball standpoint, they're pretty good. And they're guys that I'm going to kind of continue to play this year and just hope that that talent eventually just transfers into some wins. Jake Knapp has won once already in Mexico. And so I think that that is going to continue to translate well for these guys. And I think that they're in really good shape here in this event also, because if you're going to continue to strike the ball really well, you're going to continually put yourself in good spots here at Bay Hill. Now, Shane Lowry and Adam Scott are guys that are like deceptively good course fits. Like, they're guys that just tend to play well in major championship type conditions time in, time again, right? And so I don't mind going with either of the two of them. They're not sexy plays. They're not likely to win the event, but they're guys that are playing pretty good golf. They tend to play well in this type of environment, in this type of event, and I have no problem going with either of the two of them. Now, from there, I do think you can go back to Christian Bezuidenhout this week. He was very bad at the Cognizant Classic when everybody and their brother was playing him, but the statistics don't bear out that it was actually that bad. He only missed the cut by one shot, and so I'm kind of willing to go back to him, and I'm hoping that there's a little bit of flop lag with everybody avoiding him, after the poor performance. Whereas, down here in this same area, you have, Kurt Kitayama, who has won this event. You have Austin Eckroat, who's coming off of the win last week. I expect Nikolai Højgaard to be popular as well. So I do think Christian Bezuidenhout might go a little bit overlooked, and I'm kind of okay with that. Now, we do need to talk about Min-Woo Lee, who popped up on my model in a lot of those pure ball striking stats like we talked about with Jake Knapp and Ben An. And really, he showed some stuff at the Cognizant Classic because his iron play had been very poor at the start of the calendar year, and he gained about 6 strokes on approach for the event at the Cognizant Classic, really rallying on Sunday for a T2 finish. And y'all, if he's going to play like that, he's going to win some golf tournaments. performance. And I really do think that even though his history at this event is not great, he's missed the cut both times he's played it. I think that if he can continue his tee to green play that he had at the start of the calendar year in pretty much every category except his irons, and continue the iron play from last week that he had, I think this is a really good spot for Min Woo Lee, and I think he is going to be probably the most popular play in DFS this week because he is a really low price tag. Now, the last two values that I do want to talk about are guys who burned me last week. Adam Svensson was not great last week at all, but it was a lot with the putter and it was a lot with a few water balls. And so if he can kind of just bring the same play that he had tee to green, the previous few weeks and just, not be terrible with the putter, which he's been in 5 straight events, then I do think this could be a pretty good bounce back spot for him. He did come in 24th place last year, gaining strokes putting and gaining strokes on approach. So I do think that this is not a bad spot for Adam Svensson. And I'm kind of willing to bounce back after he let me down big time last week. Lee Hodges is another guy who let me down last week, but all of his strokes lost were with the putter. And so, if he's able to kind of get his tee to green game back to where it was, we know he's a guy who tends to elevate his game at long and difficult golf courses. I'm definitely willing to go back to Lee Hodges as well and just hope and pray that he's able to get that putter back to being better. Now, another guy that showed up on my model was Mackenzie Hughes, and he's another guy that, has been disappointing lately. He really played poorly in Mexico, but pretty much he's a guy who's a really good short gamer, and he tends to play well at difficult courses. He's played well at some U.S. Open type setups. He plays well out of thick rough type setups. So maybe I'm kind of willing to go to Mackenzie Hughes at $6,100 on DraftKings. I don't think he's a bad option on DraftKings. I certainly don't think I would bet him to win the tournament. And then Brendan Todd at $6,400 is another guy who missed the cut at the Cognizant Classic, showed up well on my model, and I'm definitely willing to go to him at $6,400 on DraftKings as well. All right, so let's take a quick breather here, and then let's go ahead and talk about one and done. From a one and done perspective, y'all, this is a week to use one of the big dogs. This is a signature event that carries one of the largest purses that we're going to see all year. And this is a course where the best golfers in the world are going to be able to separate themselves from the rest of the pack. And so I think that really jumps out to me as an opportunity to use one of the best players in the world and use them in one and done, knowing that, this is your only chance to use them, but this is a chance where it's as good as any for this event. So when you look at the options for one and done this week, there's so many of them with that in mind because everybody's in play, right? And so what I would think about personally is, Scheffler, McIlroy, Hovland, Schauffele, Cant Lay, they're all great plays this week, but where would you use them down the road if you were to not use them this week? And so Scottie Scheffler, it's worth noting, has not won a PGA Tour event after the Masters in the calendar year. So you can certainly use him after the Masters, but all of his wins have came April or before. So now would not be a bad time to use him, in my opinion, knowing that it's a signature event, knowing that it's a place he's won before, and knowing that if your other plan was to use him at the Masters, you're going to have the live guys available to you. If you don't use him this week, you do have the Players' Championship next week, which you could use him at also. Rory McIlroy is the king of Bay Hill. I would have no problem using him here at this event. If you do not use him here, you would have Augusta National to play him at. You would have the Open Championship to play him at. You would have Quail Hollow to play him at. So there's 3 options for Rory if you save him down the road. Victor Hovland, you do have the Memorial. You have maybe the BMW if he won that event last year at a different course, but I think this is a really great week to use Victor Hovland personally. I do think he sets up very well for the PGA Championship also, but I got to acknowledge that the live guys are available at majors, so you might not want to use him at a major. For Xander and Cant Lay, they're going to be good course fits pretty much anywhere. I do think you do want to use them in an elevated event. Patrick Cantlay would probably be my pick for the Memorial. Xander would probably be my pick for maybe Travelers or maybe the BMW Championship where, you've got a guy who's going to be a good course fit and we don't know how that course is going to play out. Now, after them, I really like Max Homa this week, and I think if you have not played Max Homa yet, this is almost like a last call on Max Homa. The only other course on the schedule that he has won at is Quail Hollow for the Wells Fargo, and so we're also out of the California swing, and he does play his best golf in the state of California. So you've got a course right now where Max Homa plays well at. He has been playing pretty well lately. I think this is a really good spot for Max Homa to use in one and done, and I would probably consider almost last call for him in terms of the season. Now, after that, like I said, like I really want to use somebody at the top of the board. So I wouldn't try to get too fancy this week. I wouldn't try to use anybody or try to get too cute. There's plenty of time left in the season to make a run. Nobody's really picked any winners yet. There's a ton of signature events left where there's going to be a ton of purses. There's guys like Ben An and Minwoo Lee and Sung J M and Ludwig Aubert, who are great course fits this week, but I think you're going to get later on events down the calendar where they're going to be one of the favorites in the field, and so you're going to have an opportunity to use them as a favorite as opposed to like a mid-range type play. Will Zalatoris, I think, is a pretty solid play this week as well. If you want to get outside the box, I think he would probably be the guy I would go with. But like I said, I think you can really keep it close to the vest this week. Pick a guy close to the top of the board. In this particular one and done that I am picking for here on the show, I am going to pick Max Homa because I still have him available, and I don't really have anywhere down the road where I can use him at, because if I use him here, I can use Rory at the only other course where I would consider Max Homa at, which is Quail Hollow. And I also have Wyndham Clark for Quail Hollow if I would like to use him there as well. All right, so that does it for the one and done strategy portion, and that does it for our Arnold Palmer. That's really hard to say. Our Arnold Palmer 2024 preview and pick show. So hopefully, we gave you guys some real good information on the course itself, some real good stats that you can pay attention to and use to help find the right guys this week. And then hopefully a lot of good insight on who those right guys are this week. So whether you're playing DFS, betting, one and done, any other game, hopefully we have you covered. Hopefully we gave you information to help you pick out some winners this week. If you like what we do here on the channel, please go ahead and hit that like button on the video, rate and review the audio, subscribe to the YouTube, subscribe to the audio feed as well. And remember, if you do want more from me, there are a few places you can get it. You can follow me on Twitter at Mike's Money Picks. Join the Fantasy Corner Discord. Link is in the description on YouTube as well as on the audio feed. And so that's basically where a lot of people talk DFS for a lot of different sports. Golf is one of them. But we also got college basketball, NBA, MLB, and more covered in there. So if you want more people to talk DFS with, it's a great place to go. And I also do write a full article to my Patreon for every PGA Tour tournament and every college basketball DFS slate right now. There will be an article for the Arnold Palmer this week as well as for the Puerto Rico Open. So if you want to read that article, patreon.com/Mike's Money Picks would be the place where you would go for that. So a reminder for the rest of the week, y'all, I don't know if I'm going to be doing any Puerto Rico Open content or not. If you want to see that content, let me know, because if there is a demand for it, I will supply something to meet that demand, trust me. So that does it for this episode, y'all. Like I said, hopefully gave you guys plenty of information to pick out some winners. I will very much enjoy the golf tournament this week. I hope you guys will as well. Best of luck to you in whatever game you're playing this week. Thank you guys for watching and listening at this point, and I will see you guys next week for the Players Championship, the 5th major.